Hey, what's up? Welcome to this After Effects tutorial. In this video, I'm gonna show you how I create a seamless loop of cloud and fog effect. So let's get right into it. First up, let's create a solid. Just make it the comp size, and you can have it in white. And I don't think it does matter later. So let's pre-compose this. Move all attributes. Let's call this our cloud fog. Let's go to our effects and look for the fractal noise. Apply it onto our white solid here, and then let's go to swirly and spline, and then open up the controls. Let's bring up the contrast just a bit. Bring down the brightness. So the exact settings is up to you to play around with it. You can just see what looks good to you after we go through most of the settings. Complexity, we can bring it up to 10, and then open up the sub settings and change the sub influence, bring it down, and then you get a bit more blur on this cloud. By the way, this is supposed to be our cloud. And then subscaling, see what looks good. Oh yes, I forgot about the scaling. Let's uncheck our uniform scale and then bring up the width. Bring up the height as well. So you can play around with it and see what looks what you would like, and then create this very flowy kind of wave effect here. And you don't have to follow my exact settings completely. Go down into the evolution settings. Open the evolution, and then let's check evolution options. Open up evolution options and check cycle evolution. So what this means is that where at the end of our one cycle of evolution, which is 360, when we come back to 0 on the one cycle of evolution, it should still be the same as when we first started off at 0 evolution, 0 degrees. I hope you get my point. So let's keyframe at 0 evolution, and then I'll click U to open up my keyframe here. Let me extend my comp. So now I'm at a 12-second comp duration. Let me extend to 30 seconds. And then let's extend this as well. So the reason I'm extending it to 30 seconds is because I want to give the animation a longer duration in one cycle of evolution. If that makes sense. So for example, let me keyframe it at 12 seconds here. Let me keyframe to one cycle, and let's also apply a loop expression. Loop. So what will happen, it will go through one cycle and then it should go back to the start again. So let me render it in half resolution just so that we can get a sense of what a 12-second animation cycle looks like. Rendering this fractal noise can be quite intense sometimes, so this will take a while if your computer is not that fast. Okay, so now we have just finished rendering our 12-second loop of this fractal noise that kind of looks like a cloud and is a starting point for what we want. So as I mentioned earlier, 12 seconds is kind of fast for a slow-moving cloud, unless you are doing a time-lapse kind of thing. Alright, let's move the keyframe from 12 seconds to 30 seconds, and the animation should slow down and we will not render this. So this is one layer. Let's duplicate our white solid, turn the one on top off, hide it, and then open up the second one that we have been working on previously, and we'll make some changes. So why we are creating a second one is to layer on the effect and give it more depth and detail. So under the fractal type, let's try something else. We can do a cloudy. We can try a linear. Feel free to experiment and try all the different settings, what it will look like with a different contrast. Maybe bump up the contrast, increase the brightness. And for this second one, we'll give it just a little bit of blacks or dark. So this second one will be a whiter kind of look. And I will show you later how we layer it together. Because of that, let's increase the brightness. We bring it down a bit. And then change up the rotation. And the scale, we can bring it down to add that extra bit of detail. And the complexity, we can bring it down just a bit. So I'm not having an exact settings here. I'm just playing around and see what it does and how I can change it up a little bit. So the animation between the two is the same. I will turn the white solid on top on. Let's press F4, change the mode to stencil luma. So what the stencil luma does is that it uses what is bright or what is lighter, and then kind of use it as a stencil. Hopefully it makes sense to you. So for example, when I turn down the brightness and it's dark, it only reveals this amount here. We get reviews in the layers below it. Let's undo this. Okay, we're back here. So what we're doing is to use the top layer and stencil the bright areas and to reveal the details of the layer beneath. So it gives on a layer effect. So what we have without it if let's say we have without the detail, the second layer of detail, and this is just a white solid, this is what we'll have. So let's bring back our second layer of fractal noise to see this level of detail, and then you can adjust the amount of lights and dark over here. And just to check on our loop, let's go to 29 seconds. We'll turn off the white solid at the bottom, and we'll render the last 1 second to the first 1 second. Alright, let's play. Okay, so you get the idea. Let's go back to our previous comp. So this is what we created in our previous tutorial, where we have our Outrun text and glows, and our sun here, our ripple effect on the bottom, and then a ripple grid as well. Now let's just solo our cloud fog here, and then let's put our sun on. We can add our glows as well, and we'll just leave it as that. Let's also turn on our background layer. Okay, so first thing, I will change the comp size. If you have been following along, you might want to change all our comps. Oh, there's a lot of comps to change. Damn it. Okay, from here I can kind of see that the fog feels kind of too bright. So I'm gonna darken the top fractal noise layer. And then it gives it a darker overall look. So you can kind of scrub through and see how the fog or the cloud changes as it goes. And if you want, you can turn down to quarter resolution for your rendering, and then just kind of see how it shows overall, how it animates throughout the 30-second comp. Let's go to our effects. We can add on a number of effects here. What do I look for? I'm looking for the tint. We can apply our tint to our cloud here. So instead of something black and white, we can apply maybe a complementary color. You can swap our colors and see. Yeah. So the white controls most of the color here. And then you can sort of see how it looks like overall at different parts of your timeline. Let's just turn some of this back on because it looks weird with this being cut off here. Alright, let's go open this up. If you want to adjust the amount of cloud, there's a way to do it. Let's add a simple choke to our cloud. So you can bring it up, bring it down, and adjust to how intense you want your cloud to look like. So this, in some ways, it looks kind of like a smoke effect already. Another one you can add is a Gaussian blur. Let's just repeat the edge pixels and then turn up the blur, both horizontal and vertical. Turn off the simple choke for a moment, and then see how the Gaussian blur affects this. So maybe you just want a bit of Gaussian blur, apply the simple choke. I would go for something just a bit. I have now 8.6, and then you can kind of see how all this flows. Another thing you can try is to scale it up a bit, scale your fog a bit, and then see where you want to place it. Maybe not too much scaling. So you can always go in and go back into your cloud fog effect and then just adjust the settings and fine tune what you really want to see. You can try to duplicate this, bring down the opacity, make them 3D objects, and change the position. So one of them can be further in, one of them can be much closer to you, and you can adjust the position of it. And then you bring down the opacity even further, so you can layer on the effects this way and kind of add a sense of depth. So after this, I will be making a 3D prism, a 3D pyramid, triangle, kind of a 3D object, and it's all in line with the Synthwave direction that we are sort of flowing with. If you have any suggestions, just let me know in the comments. And if you want to download the project file, I will save this into Google Drive. You just give me your email address and I will send you a link to it. Okay, for those of you who have been following along my tutorial series, after layering it on as a 3D, you also want to add a reflection and put it above and below the reflection kind of thing. Where we left off, we had two clouds here, and both of it have their own opacity, and we are using the ripple comp as an inverted mat here. So we have two copies here, and below the displacement I duplicated the same object, the same thing. And for our scale, change the Y. Remember to uncheck the constraint and change the Y to a negative, whatever you have scaled it to. After that, you still have to position it. So for example, let me solo my cloud fog. And that's my first one. And then my cloud here, I had to bring it down so that it reflects nicely with a nice symmetry here. Same thing for the other one. Before that, it was something like this. So I had to bring it down and see where eyeball it and see where it looks good. And that is how you add it into your current scene. Because of the fog, we have this extra displacement happening here and there along the edges here. You would have to select everything and pre-comp everything you have and scale it up just a bit so that you can cover up the edges that have been displaced. And one more thing that I did is to move my previous loop animation from my grids from 3 and 4 seconds to now 5 and 6 seconds, which are multiples of 30 seconds, so that they would loop within the 30-second range just nice together with our cloud